I would say the key takeaway when it comes to fire is when we want to birth something into creation. It's very potent for helping people move through grief and anger and any of those really intense elements and emotions. Hey, and welcome back to our series on elemental rituals, where we go over the 4 main elements of Gaia, each episode going over one of the 4. So it's a 4-part series. We're going through the 3rd episode on fire today. So if you haven't watched the last 2 episodes on earth and water, I highly recommend you have a look at those just so you have a little more context. But for now, I'm going to get started by showing you this next slide. So with this slide here, it's really just here to give you context of how we view the 4 elements here at Somatic Body, and so that you can kind of understand the lens that we're viewing these 4 elements when we're talking about creating ritual with them and practices. And it's also just a really good guide if you're completely new to the 4 elements and how they can be viewed. So feel free to take a pause here, take this all in so you have a bit more context. You can also take a screenshot if you like, and then we will be moving on to the fire element. So the fire element. Obviously, we want to tread with caution when it comes to working with fire, also known as pyromancy. Of course, take the necessary precautions. Do not touch the fire. Do not have fire near anything that could be burnt that is fire worthy. And do not have this around pets and children, for example. All those things you already know. Take it as you will. I am not responsible for any risks that you take, but I just think it's worth mentioning. You know, it's like those warning stickers that you have to put on candles when you make them. I used to make candles. I love candles. So warning sticker right here for you before we go forward. Now, when we're working with the fire element, this is our most masculine of the 4 elements. Of course, there is no right or wrong. There is an element of feminine essence within fire as well. But the fire itself reflects that of the sun, the solar energy, and it is a very masculine, very powerful energy. It is what we would call the peak energy of the masculine, just as water is that peak, powerful essence of the feminine. So when we're working with fire, we're working with a very masculine, very strong, very potent energy. We're thinking logic, action, mental clarity, consciousness, so conceptualizing things, making sense of things. We're also thinking of expression, purification, because that's what fire does as an element. It purifies things. So releasing what no longer serves us, going through death and rebirth, or some kind of transmutation or transformation. And there's a lot of different ways we can perceive fire and look at fire over traditions, cultures. But I would say the key takeaway when it comes to fire is when we want to birth something into creation, birth something new. The fire element comes in when we're talking about our reproductive phases or the lunar phases. The fire element comes in when we're at our most masculine. So this is when we're ovulating or in full moon. Full moon is powerful, it's potent. Or we're working with solar energy, also powerful, potent, very masculine. And when we're talking about ovulation, this is our peak phase of creation. You know, then we break down the egg if we don't conceive, and then we bleed, which is like the breakdown. So when we're working with fire, it's very much a creative energy. So the key takeaway here when we're working with fire is to really release, work on letting go and purifying, cleansing ourselves of what we no longer need, and bringing forth something new, a new seed of creation. So I would say out of all the elements, when we're working with fire, this is probably the one where it is actually most important to instill the next step after the ritual. So whatever practice or ritual you have when you're working with fire, take that next step and do it straight after. I would suggest, obviously, do what feels right for you, but fire is our most creative and momentum-based frequency when it comes to the 4 elements. So we really do want to step into that frequency of fire by also honoring it and taking the next piece of the momentum, you know, keep the momentum going. So ways that we can work with fire. We have solar water. I've talked about water infusions in the last 2 episodes, but when we're working with solar water specifically, it works similar to that of lunar water. When we talked about a lunar water infusion in the last episode with water, with fire, we're talking about a solar infusion with water. So this is where we would place the vessel of water, whether it's a bottle, a jar, a bowl that's slightly covered but translucent covering if possible. And we're letting the sun, either in the early hours of the morning, which is best because then you can work with it during the day, or the late evening hours. Because if you do a solar infusion in the middle of the day, for example, and it's peak summer and you have it in a sealed jar, this is going to sweat and it's not going to be nice, especially if for your solar water ritual, you're planning on consuming it. It's not going to be very nice. It's going to taste stale and stagnant and warm and slightly like not moldy, but you know. So doing a nice morning solar infusion, so waking up with the sunrise, maybe doing a couple sun salutes or whatever feels right for you, getting the jar ready, taking it out of the sun after a couple hours, just as long as it's not within that kind of 3 to 4 hour peak of the peak sun in the middle of summer, basically. But infusing it with the sun, whatever hours feels right for you. And after this, you can then use it in ritual, in practice to, for example, anoint areas of the body. You can consume it. You can also anoint objects within ritual. Or you can simply gaze. So we talked about with water, you can do a gaze, like a sear in the calm water. Say it's a big bowl of water or a body of water that you've infused with solar energy. You can also do fire gazing, which we talked about. Water gazing, water scrying. We have fire scrying, which is where we would say have a candle or a container of fire to receive visions and messages from. So this could actually even be a fireplace or a big bonfire. And we would take that time and space with no pressure, no time constraints to gaze into the fire, just like we would with water scrying. And here you can actually, because fire is such a potent and momentum-based frequency, you can actually ask specific questions here or call forth a creation. You know, we talked about creations, so you can do that here as well. If there is a truth you deeply want to speak or a desire you really want to bring forth, this is where fire scrying can be especially great. Also, another thing that I've come to experience, which I haven't put on the slide here, is with fire gazing, what I've come to discover on a personal level, it's very potent for helping people move through grief and anger and any of those really intense, almost like shadow elements and emotions that come with something big. When something big's happened and we're ready to really purify from it, we want to help ourselves release and get that momentum, get that stagnation out of the body, those things we've been holding on to because they're so deep and so hard for us to deal with on our own. Sometimes we don't know how to. I've found fire gazing to be very therapeutic for this. There was a time where I was really grieving a relationship, and it took me years to get over this relationship. But I do strongly remember fire gazing as the one ritual that really helped me release. And I didn't even know that that's what it was at the time. I was kind of just very new to all the energetic aspects of everything, very new to the world of spirituality. And for me, I just lit a candle and stared at it and just started crying. And I felt so much relief afterwards that I actually created a ritual with it. And I would do it quite often, sometimes once. I think there was a point where I did it almost once a week, every week for a good month. And it just helps me to really remove that stagnation, purify from the shame, from the guilt, from the grief that I had with that relationship. It really helped me to release, again, that purification energy and move forward. Bring new seeds into creation. So for me, fire gazing was a really big one, and I didn't even know that that's what it was at the time. But now I can look back in retrospect and have great reverence for fire gazing. And then we also have candle spells, which, you know, can be used interchangeably with fire gazing, because you can use a candle for fire gazing as well. But with candle spells, it can be to do with the specific color or the specific scent of the candle. So we're working with color frequencies or scent frequencies, which is also bringing an element of the air element, because when we're working with scent and breath, we're working with air as well. So you're actually kind of combining an element of air with fire. Just like in the previous episode, we talked about combining water infusion, so the element of water, with other elements. So if we're doing a herbal water infusion, we're working with the water element. And we're also working with the earth element because we're bringing in herbs or flower essences. And then we're also bringing in an element of air if we're bringing in the scents of those flowers. So again, you can really blend and work with all 4 elements here if you want to in ritual. But I'm just breaking it down for this series so you can have like a real distinction between the 4 of them and then also see how they can come together as well. So I hope you enjoyed this episode on the fire element. I'll see you in our last episode, the next one where we talk about the air elements.